Russia is a vast and enigmatic nation spanning two continents, rich with history, culture, and political intrigue. It also has a complex history. From the frigid tundra of Siberia to the bustling streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg, Russia has played a pivotal role on the global stage in recent history. Its history is as diverse as its landscapes, and its complicated, sometimes tense relationships with neighboring countries have shaped its destiny and the world's. From 1900 to 2022, its modern history has included political upheavals, military conflicts, and shifting alliances. Keep watching to discover Russia's contemporary history, from the end of Imperial Russia to the formation of the Soviet Union to the post-Cold War era and beyond. 1900 to 1917, the end of Imperial Russia. At the dawn of the 20th century, Russia was an empire under the rule of Tsar Nicholas II. On the outside, it might have seemed that Russia was thriving. It was becoming more urbanized, its population was growing, and a seemingly stable government system ruled the people. Major Russian cities like St. Petersburg and Moscow had nearly doubled in population and, by some measures, seemed to be thriving. However, discontent was growing beneath the surface, and the empire's end was drawing closer. The growth caused overcrowding, which resulted in destitute living conditions for Russia's industrial workers. Economic hardships, political repression, and defeat in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905 fueled unrest. The Russo-Japanese War was the first major war of the 20th century, in which Japan forced Russia to abandon its expansionist policy in East Asia. With their victory in the war, Japan became the first Asian power in modern times to defeat a European power. Although Russia remained a significant power in Asia, it had taken a blow. While this victory was a milestone for Japan, Russia's loss aggravated unrest in the country and added to the national anger. Within 2 months, the Revolution of 1905 forced Nicholas II, the Russian Tsar, to issue the October Manifesto, transforming Russia from an unlimited autocracy to a constitutional monarchy. It also promised political reforms and civil rights and allowed more people to participate in elections. In 1914, Russia entered World War I against Austria-Hungary to defend Serbia. This decision was another factor in the perfect storm that ended Imperial Russia. It led to immense human loss, economic collapse, and widespread social unrest. In the end, Russia had to withdraw from the war as revolution broke out within its borders. The tensions in Russia came to a head in 1917. 1917 to 1922. The Russian Civil War and the formation of the Soviet Union. When the Russian Revolution began, it catapulted the country into a new era. The violent February Revolution overthrew centuries of Russian imperial rule and forced Tsar Nicholas II to abdicate the throne. Although it started on March 8, 1917, it is known as the February Revolution because, at the time, Russia used the Julian calendar. March 8th in the widely used Gregorian calendar was February 23rd for the Russians. After Nicholas II's abdication, a provisional government was established. It was called the Russian Provisional Government, and it aimed to organize elections and establish a democratic system in Russia. However, even in its early days, it faced opposition from the Soviets, councils of working-class Russians, making governance difficult. The provisional government was short-lived. Its failure to address the deep-seated social and economic problems in Russia created a power vacuum that allowed the Bolsheviks to seize control through yet another revolution just 8 months later. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, took power in the October Revolution, which occurred in November 1917, marking the beginning of communist rule in Russia. Following the Bolshevik takeover, Russia descended into a civil war between the Red Army, the Bolsheviks, and the White Army, anti-Bolshevik forces. The war devastated the country, but by 1922, the Bolsheviks had emerged victorious. That same year, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, was officially established, incorporating Russia and several neighboring states, including Ukraine and Belarus, among others. This marked the start of a new era that would see Russia at the helm of a communist superpower. 1922 to 1945, Stalin's rule and World War II. After Lenin died in 1924, Joseph Stalin rose to power. He implemented harsh policies that led to widespread purges, forced collectivization, and mass repression. The Soviet Union rapidly industrialized, but at a tremendous human cost. Some credit him with turning Russia into a world superpower, but many question whether the price was worth it. In 1922, Stalin was appointed the General Secretary of the Communist Party's Central Committee, and he used that position to consolidate power by controlling all appointments, setting agendas, and moving the staff so that, eventually, everyone successfully owed their status to him. By the time the Communist Party realized what he was doing, it was too late. Stalin had appointed his people, and Lenin, the only person who could have challenged him, was on his deathbed, incapable of speech after a series of strokes. When Lenin could no longer lead due to his failing health, Stalin became the country's de facto leader. Upon Lenin's death, Stalin began to make more aggressive moves. He destroyed the old party leaders, using their weaknesses to turn them against each other. At first, he just removed them from their posts and exiled them. Then, after realizing that distance couldn't stop them from criticizing him, he switched tactics. This ended in a reign of terror and show trials in the 1930s, during which the founding fathers of the Soviet Union were revealed as enemies of the people, who had supposedly been spying for capitalist intelligence services. They were then shot. The purges, or repressions as they were called, extended far beyond the elite members of the party. They also reached into every local party group and nearly all intellectual professions, since anyone with a higher education was suspected of being a potential traitor. This approach deprived the Soviet Union of many of its intellectuals. During World War II, the Soviet Union initially signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Nazi Germany. In this non-aggression pact, the two countries agreed they would not attack each other, and they secretly divided the countries that lay between them. However, after Hitler launched an invasion in 1941 that took Stalin by surprise and devastated the Russian army, Russia joined the Allies. Stalin had so firmly believed he could trust Hitler that even when warned of the imminent invasion, he dismissed the intelligence. The Soviet Union played a decisive role in the war, ultimately capturing Berlin in 1945. However, the war left the country deeply scarred, with millions dead and much of its infrastructure in ruins. 1945 to 1991. The Cold War and Soviet influence on its neighbors. In the post-war era, the USSR emerged as a global superpower and became locked in the Cold War with the United States. The Soviet Union extended its influence over Eastern Europe, installing communist governments in Poland, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and others they had liberated from Nazi control during the war. During this time, the Americans and British feared the spread of communism into Western Europe and worldwide. As a political show of force against the Soviet Union and its allies, the US, Canada, and other European allies formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. In response, the Soviet Union consolidated power with other Eastern European countries under a rival alliance called the Warsaw Pact, which intensified the Cold War, a political power struggle between the two groups. The Cold War persisted in various forms until the fall of the Soviet Union. 1991 to 2000, the fall of the Soviet Union and the Yeltsin era. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, leading to the independence of multiple republics, including Ukraine, the Baltic states, and the Central Asian nations. The Soviet Union dissolved into 15 independent countries: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Estonia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. The collapse was accelerated by a failed coup in August 1991, led by communist hardliners who feared that Gorbachev's reforms would destroy the USSR. However, the final blow came on December 8th, when the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus signed the Belovezh Accords, officially declaring the end of the Soviet Union. On December 25th, Gorbachev resigned as Soviet president, and the next day, December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. Once the Soviet Union was over, Boris Yeltsin, who had been elected president, eliminated most price controls, privatized several significant state assets, allowed private property ownership, and embraced free market principles. However, these actions did not affect the Russian economy as he might have hoped. Although some oligarchs became shockingly wealthy under his reforms, many Russians lapsed deeper into poverty. Inflation ran rampant, and the cost of living rose drastically. Boris Yeltsin attempted to transition to a market economy. However, the 1990s were marked by economic turmoil, corruption, and a decline in Russia's global influence. Relations with former Soviet states were strained as Russia struggled to redefine its role in the post-Soviet world. 2000 to 2022, the rise of Vladimir Putin and regional conflicts. Vladimir Putin assumed the presidency in 2000, bringing stability and increasing authoritarianism. He turned Russia from a democratic state into an autocratic one. He decreased poverty in Russia by nearly half, and the GDP has skyrocketed under his leadership, although that may be more a reflection of high oil prices than of Putin. While he has done a lot of good for the country, he also launched wars with neighboring countries and repressed any political opposition, creating a regime in which his opponents are often persecuted. While there is criticism about his leadership, he has undeniably been influential. In the decades after his rise, Russia sought to reassert its influence, leading to conflicts such as the Second Chechen War and tensions with Georgia, which culminated in the 2008 Russo-Georgian War. Meanwhile, Russia's relationship with Ukraine became increasingly fraught, particularly after Ukraine's 2014 revolution, which ousted a pro-Russian government. In response, Russia annexed Crimea in a move that was widely condemned by the international community. In the years following Crimea's annexation, Russia's relationship with its neighbors became even more complex. Tensions with NATO and the European Union escalated, and economic sanctions were imposed. Russia's involvement in Syria, cyber operations, and political influence campaigns further shaped its global reputation. In 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, leading to widespread conflict, humanitarian crises, and further geopolitical divisions. The war in Ukraine deteriorated quickly into fighting, heavy shelling, and missile and rocket attacks throughout the country. Russia caused immense amounts of devastation and destruction, forcing millions of Ukrainians to flee and uprooting a third of the entire population in the first year of conflict. As of early 2025, Russia was still in conflict with Ukraine, leading to much tension with many of its neighbors, as well as countries overseas. Russia's modern history is still being shaped, and no one knows what might happen next in its story. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about Russia and its complex history, check out our book, Russian History, a captivating guide to the history of Russia, including events such as the Mongol invasion, the Napoleonic invasion, reforms of Peter the Great, the fall of the Soviet Union, and more. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.